The air inside the Royal Conservatory of Music was always heavy with expectation, and tonight it was electric. Crystal chandeliers glowed over heads filled with dreams, and beneath them, aristocrats, benefactors, and the finest musical prodigies gathered, sipping champagne and exchanging rehearsed compliments. In a world of privilege and pedigree, no one noticed the man in the shadows pushing a mop bucket, except to avoid him. His name was Arthur, the janitor, an aging man in faded blue overalls, with silver hair and eyes like forgotten songs. Every evening after the Academy's elite packed up their violins, flutes, and designer heels, Arthur remained, cleaning the grand halls, polishing gold-rimmed mirrors and emptying bins lined with torn sheet music. But Arthur carried a secret. He wasn't always a janitor. Decades ago, he was a pianist, a promising one, until tragedy tore his world apart. His wife had died in a car crash on the eve of his Carnegie Hall debut, and in his grief, he had walked away from the piano and never returned. That was until tonight. In the center of the stage, a new prodigy rehearsed, Clarissa Montrose, heiress to a shipping fortune draped in crimson silk. Her blonde curls carefully pinned, her fingers dancing on a Steinway grand that cost more than most houses. She was beautiful, talented, and famously proud. Some said arrogant. Her father had bought the conservatory a new wing just for her. But Clarissa's talent was genuine, even if her heart was locked in a cage of pressure and perfection. Her recital was just hours away and something was off. Her usual rhythm felt hollow. Her notes, though flawless, lacked soul. She slammed the piano shut and stormed out to call her teacher, leaving the room in a hush. That's when Arthur, alone and sweeping near the front row, was drawn toward the piano like a moth to a flame. His hands trembled. He hadn't touched a piano in over 30 years, but something in that moment, the silence, the moonlight streaking across the keys, pulled him in. Slowly, reverently, he sat down, and then he played. Not a grand performance, but something tender. A melody from long ago, filled with sorrow and longing and love, the lullaby he once wrote for his late wife. Unbeknownst to him, Clarissa had returned through the side door and stood frozen behind the curtains, eyes wide, heart pounding. She had never heard anything like it. It was raw, it was broken, it was alive. Her chest tightened, her hands trembled. She wasn't angry. She was shaken. As Arthur ended, he whispered, "Sorry," and stood to leave. But Clarissa stepped forward. "Wait," she said, voice soft but firm. The room turned. Guests had started arriving, trickling in for the sound check. Her voice echoed in the acoustics. "Do that again?" Arthur paused, confused. "Please," she insisted. "Play that again." The staff and early guests were stunned. A janitor at the piano? But she walked toward him, nodded, and Arthur, swallowing hard, sat again. And this time, as he played, Clarissa closed her eyes and began to sing, not with perfection, but with heart. For the first time, her voice cracked. It soared. When the song ended, the handful of people in the hall were on their feet. Silence, then thunderous applause. No one knew what they'd just witnessed, but they knew it was something real. Clarissa turned to Arthur and said, "You're not a janitor, you're a maestro." Arthur's eyes welled, and he tried to explain, but she stopped him. "Come to the recital. Sit with me. I want to do this together." He shook his head. "No, miss, I can't. I'm not." "There." Clarissa looked at him with defiance and said, "Yes, you do." And just like that, a spark lit up, a stage long forgotten. But what would happen when the spotlight found them both? Would the world accept a janitor at the piano? Or would pride and pressure tear this unlikely duet apart? Subscribe now so you don't miss what happens in Chapter 2. The moment that left the entire room breathless. Arthur sat quietly backstage in a borrowed suit that hung awkwardly on his frame, staring down at his trembling hands. Clarissa had insisted he be her duet partner for the recital, but the idea still felt surreal, absurd, even a janitor on the conservatory's main stage, sharing the spotlight with the Academy's pride. It wasn't just unorthodox, it was unheard of. But Clarissa had been relentless. After hearing his music, something inside her had shifted. She no longer cared about her father's money or her instructor's strict coaching. For the first time in years, she felt something real in music. Something more than perfection, soul, and Arthur. The man who scrubbed floors and wiped away others' messes was the only one who had shown her that. When news broke that the recital would feature a duet between Clarissa and the conservatory janitor. The city's musical elite didn't just scoff, they raged. Her father called her in fury, accusing her of tarnishing their family name. Sponsors threatened to pull funding. The headmaster begged her to reconsider. "You don't understand," she told them all. "I'm not saving him. He's saving me." Meanwhile, Arthur battled his own ghosts. He hadn't played in front of an audience since the night before the accident. Every chord brought back memories, his wife's laughter, the glow of stage lights, the taste of dreams that had turned to ash. He almost backed out the night before the show, but then Clarissa found him alone in the empty auditorium, staring out at the rows of velvet chairs. "You're afraid?" she whispered. "So am I, but maybe we're not supposed to do this for them. Maybe we do it for us." And that somehow gave him the courage to stay. The recital hall was packed that night. Reporters lined the balcony. The audience buzzed with speculation, ridicule, curiosity. Some expected a train wreck. Others hoped for scandal. None of them were ready for what actually happened. The curtain lifted, and gasps filled the room as Arthur stepped out in silence beside Clarissa. He looked out over a sea of skeptical eyes, and felt the old panic begin to rise. But Clarissa reached out and gently touched his hand. That grounding warmth steadied him. He nodded, then he sat. The lights dimmed. Clarissa stepped to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice echoing. "Tonight was supposed to be about proving I'm the best. But I've realized that doesn't matter. Tonight is about honoring the music, and the man who reminded me why I love it." Whispers rippled through the audience. She turned to Arthur. Mr. Arthur Hale. A spotlight fell on him. There was a long, tense pause. Then he began to play. A low, haunting melody spilled from the piano, the same lullaby he'd played the night they met. But this time, richer, fuller, alive. As his fingers danced across the keys, Clarissa stepped forward and began to sing. And what came out of her wasn't polished perfection. It was something more. It was honest. Her voice cracked, sword pleated. She wasn't hiding behind scales or bravado. She was open. The music told their story: pain, redemption, loss, hope, and the audience fell into stunned silence. No one moved. No one breathed. As the final note hung in the air like a held tear, Arthur let his hands fall away from the keys. For a moment there was nothing. Then the room exploded. Thunderous applause, cheers, tears streaming down cheeks. Even the headmaster, who had once scoffed, rose to his feet in awe. Cameras flashed wildly. Phones lit up. Social media flooded. With footage, "Who is this man?" people asked. "Why have we never heard of him?" Backstage, Clarissa turned to Arthur with glassy eyes. "You did it," she whispered. Arthur shook his head. "We did." That night, interviews poured in. Offers followed. The Academy issued a public apology and offered Arthur a permanent position as artist-in-residence. Clarissa's father, after watching the performance replayed online a dozen times, called her in tears and said, "I was wrong." But more than all of that, Arthur began to play again. Not for fame, not for others, but because the music inside him had finally been set free. Clarissa, too, transformed. Gone was the cold prodigy. In her place stood a young woman full of fire and heart. She and Arthur began performing together in recitals across the country, their unlikely partnership inspiring thousands. Critics hailed them as the soul and the spark to broken pieces that fit perfectly. In every city, Arthur would take the stage, still wearing his worn-out shoes beneath fine tuxedos, and remind the world that greatness doesn't come from status, it comes from spirit. And Clarissa never forgot the moment that changed her life, the night the janitor touched her piano. If this story moved you, inspired you, or gave you goosebumps, hit that subscribe button now. Because more powerful stories like this one are coming your way. Ordinary people, extraordinary moments, and music that lives beyond the notes. Asterisk.